Welcome to Fingerprint Education's Using Pictures to Support Instruction. We will outline the do's, don'ts, and why we include images throughout the learning cycle. Anytime we venture into discussions around direction delivery, teaching resources, and diverse learners, we encounter a truly infinite number of factors that impact learning. For the purposes of this presentation, we're not getting into visual literacy, color theory, or assignments wherein students are answering questions with pictures or using pictures as note-taking. Instead, we'll stay focused on how to and how not to be intentional about adding images to your physical instructional materials. Let's get started. Simple image, simple question. What does it mean? Really, for you, right now, what does it mean? I've heard everything from hat, magic, magician, accessories, formal wear or fancy event, Abraham Lincoln, a historical time period, even the greatest showman. The list goes on and on. Each of us are looking at the same image, but with individual lenses colored by personal experiences. Immediate environment plays a role too. This picture presented in an ad flyer versus social studies class versus English language arts all impacts how we make meaning of what we see. Okay, here's what's going on in your mind to address my question, what does it mean? Initially, we identify the literal. What is it? Well, it's a black hat with some sort of rim. It's also more of a top hat style. Then we move to increased context and application. This process happens more quickly with visual representation, which can be great for catalyzing learning and getting through directions and direct instruction quickly. However, it also proves how much more important it is with pictures to catch misconceptions early and guide the use of visuals. When we say pictures, we're referring to the whole umbrella of image types. From icons, vectors, symbols, more realistic photographs, little drawings we do, think about anchor charts or up on the board while we're giving directions. Even video clips that are less than 10 seconds, I would consider a picture for the purposes of today. The context for using pictures spans across instruction, starting with giving directions. Then, on individual assignment questions, think task cards. Setting the stage or presenting an objective, oftentimes when we're trying to be really transparent with students about learning and language objectives, we use pictures to help anchor those more complex or abstract ideas. Again, anchor charts come to mind. Text annotations, what a great place to use pictures to help hold your thinking and come back to important reference points. Within feedback comments, this is a great place to use pictures as teachers. Again, a whole other concept would be using pictures for students, giving peer feedback and commenting back and forth. These two primary considerations will take you really far in using pictures to support instruction. First, we maintain consistency. Use the same image over and over again to represent a concept, item, or term each time it comes up. This way, when a new picture is presented for a familiar idea, it immediately and very strongly cues students to a change in how they'll be using that term or addressing that same concept. One great way to keep easy access to those pictures is to establish an extra slide or page to house your pictures. Regardless of which platform you use, choose the most readily available and most often used source. This strategy will be especially important for delivering spiraled curriculum and ongoing interventions, wherein you need to locate those icons, photographs, and anchor charts regularly. Secondly, use pictures effectively. Label their use to give context and purpose. Recall the black hat example. We need to explain what makes the picture significant. Just as I talked through those icons to explain consistency, using a think aloud strategy is best for giving this type of context. Simply and clearly identifying the meaning of the picture is what gives the image power to support learning. Otherwise, each individual reading the picture will interpret it differently. We then invite confusion and widen the understanding of our expectations. You can think aloud by identifying a picture as a concrete object. This is a literal visual. Think about giving directions, especially with younger students, about materials they should be using or should definitely not have available during an activity. An example of a given category. An additional example, abstract connection used as inspiration versus a direct connection. This is going to be important too, especially if you're copying a picture of an anchor chart you've used in the past to anchor to a shared experience versus a clip art picture that's really meant to be used in a more abstract fashion. Labeling that context will be important, otherwise pictures don't get used the way you intended them to be used. And of course, we use realia whenever it's possible. Realia is exactly what it sounds like. It's using the real thing. Think photographs or sculptures as secondary realia. Almost the real thing, but still better than a drawing. All right, one more time for the folks in the back. Visual representation is a complex language art. We typically think of language arts as reading, writing, listening, speaking, but we forget about visual representation. And clearly, from just these first few slides of information and our black hat example, using pictures is not always a lower level scaffold, but instead, pictures invite a whole myriad of webbing between our own personal connections, our cultural backgrounds, and our current learning. Visual representation is a complex language art. Okay, there are two additional visual representation concepts that we'll cover. The why we use pictures, and how to evaluate their effective use. Now would be a good time to hit pause and grab a few examples of your own picture use to reference as we continue. Reasons for using pictures to support instruction. Okay, we'll engage with this concept in 2 steps. First, press pause and read the list of common reasons. Second, reflect. Identify on your own your personal glows, like the star, the ways in which you are already comfortable using pictures in teaching, and your grows. Think about that flower. The ways in which you maybe haven't yet used pictures or have questions about how pictures could serve that purpose. These are the 2 most common uses. We bring images to the forefront to explain abstract concepts and try to lower the amount of verbiage presented to students. Conversely, Tier 2 vocab is a necessary part of instruction across all grade levels and all content areas. Tier 2 includes academic vocab, such as identify, describe, explain, analyze, connect, and the like. But it's also encompassing multiple meaning words, terms that change their meaning as they're used across disciplines. Now we're ready to dig into how to use these pictures to support instruction. So let's generate a quick common rubric. A powerful start is to identify mastery features, those traits of our instructional pictures that fully meet our expectations. For pictures, we've come up with these 4 traits. A picture must meet the intended purpose. Remember, we just went through and reflected on 6 common purposes for using pictures. Of course, some are more literal, more lower level, others elicit higher level thinking. For our purpose now, as long as you have chosen a reason, the picture needs to meet that purpose. The chosen picture supports a significant piece of instruction. This will become more clear as we see some examples. The chosen picture maintains consistency as applicable, contextualize with a label, written or preferably a verbal explanation. Again, think aloud through your pictures, and being able to explain without adding more verbiage is going to be preferable. And obviously, with static pictures, we might not understand how a teacher contextualizes, so we'll have to talk through some of those. After identifying your mastery traits, go to developing and below. These areas of our rubric will outline the stepping stones, the things that might be missing. We're anticipating needs for ourselves of how we can progress to mastery. Developing. I'm jumping to the underlined sections because underlined text will tell me what's different about developing from mastery. In developing, we have insignificant or extraneous information that's being supported by pictures. This could mean that the picture is actually distracting me from learning. And a weak or inconsistent image. That's obviously going to make it less effective. Below is not meeting really any of our expectations. Finally, we'll look at exceeds. It's taking all of the mastery level expectations and adding onto it that students can describe the purpose of the visual using content-specific vocabulary. I took a page from the Danielson framework and brought the expectation of student-directed application to this part of our rubric. Now, none of our examples are live with kids, so it doesn't apply for us, but it's important to always think about what the next step would look like. All right, we have 18 examples to look through. Let's start dissecting. These are examples of lesson starter slides from a 4th grade class. So the teacher posts the lesson number, a student-friendly version of the learning goal, and then pictures to start activating that prior knowledge and getting students to develop vocabulary acquisition around the learning target. These slides are initially pretty overwhelming, so let's lean on our rubric. The purpose is content-driven and to anchor the learning target. I think it does that, especially if the images are talked through and if students are able to interpret their own connections. We'll assume with all of our examples that there is consistency, that this teacher has followed a similar format, and so the task is not out of balance. All these pictorial examples seem highly related to the content, and the bolded text helps to establish context. These are developing plus examples. I say that because of the consistency. It may be consistent format, but it would be really difficult to have 5 or 6 images that consistently represent the same concept. Here we see 2 more examples. These pictures offer both content and procedural supports. On the left, we're seeing an image of timed pair share. So we know this is a familiar sharing structure for the students. And a picture is a great way to share your expectations without listing a whole paragraph of directions. There's also a visual example of the graphic organizer students will use. Kagan, the timed pair share, in Thinking Maps, which is the graphic organizer that this teacher chose to use, are both highly consistent structures, which is great. Similarly, the brace map on the right uses pictures to help explain each component of a fiction story recount. If in fact the Three Little Pigs has been read, and if the other pictures have been used in previous instruction of each story element, these are great quality choices, potentially mastery examples. Okay, now we have some task cards. Clip art on task cards is really common. Let's dissect how effective these examples are. Number 13. The picture here is of the example, the energy of the speeding race car, versus the primary content, the types of energy. So initially I might think this is extraneous information. However, it is a very thoughtful choice because the lines following the car do help students recognize there's movement, and that will definitely support their learning and support more accurate answering. Just a race car image would land us more in the below category because it's not really addressing the content. Number 2, that is what's going on here. The image of the soccer ball doesn't help students answer the question. And if you think your students might be tripped up by the phrase soccer ball, they'll definitely need support with speed, velocity, and acceleration. So I'd recommend that this teacher add an image used in initial teaching, of course, above each of these 3 terms: speed, velocity, and acceleration. If they do that for the whole set of task cards, it will remind students of the learning goal and continually support vocabulary acquisition. Number 3, similarly, having those consistent pictures for the whole set of task cards will be helpful. However, this roller coaster picture is better than the soccer ball because it's a better representation of the action. So we're supporting visualization and getting a more accurate student response. So for number 13, that actually falls under mastery. But 2 and 3 are pretty tough representations. I would really put them in the below, maybe the developing category. They're not showing significant pieces of instruction, and they're not contextualized that well. These are 2 examples of activity direction. So they're flow maps or multiple steps that are outlining what it is students are expected to do. On the left-hand side, we have numbered heads together, another great Kagan structure. And these pictures are directly from Kagan, so they definitely get consistency points. This is a clearly procedure-focused visual, and each picture supports that step's purpose. Everything is well contextualized with text and the picture together. But step 3 is pretty complex, and it's the only section that seems like it might need more support. Huddle up in the words is definitely something that our multilingual, multicultural students may never have heard, and so that picture is helpful. However, to huddle up and coach teammates is a complex task. So coaching might require a separate set of expectations, a different anchor chart that you'll make sure to reference during instruction here for numbered heads together, and definitely modeling to get kids to be able to coach each other rather than give answers, give up, correct each other right away. Coaching is a difficult skill. This picture may or may not support that step as well as it can. However, it does meet our intended purpose. They are significant pieces. It looks like the structure was broken down really well. And again, consistency points for being directly from Kagan. These are pictures that you can use over and over again. And it is contextualized. So numbered heads together, mastery. Informational source, Brain Pop Junior video. This looks like it's one slide out of several. And so we're just looking at a small screenshot of what students are really doing here. The blue slide does add some more content supports over just procedural supports. We see the same icon used to cue students into locating details in nonfiction. That's that magnifying glass. We see it up on top near the learning objective, and then we also see it on step 3. Watch video, listen for key details about digital citizenship. And so this consistency and constant use of the same image really does support students in their learning. We also have a puzzle piece to support making connections, which seems like a really natural choice. Making connections, puzzle pieces, that looks and sounds really good together. It meets the intended purpose, it is significant, and it's easily used in consistency. A smiley face is used to help direct students to explain new learning. New, in this case, learned from a video. Now this icon would be really helpful if it's also used in text annotation, or if this is the emoji students use to provide peer feedback. Overall, pretty well crafted. I'd say these are both mastery examples. Here we have a direction slide where we're reading or previewing this text Back of the Bus by Aaron Reynolds, and a screenshot from an Explain Everything activity that some younger students are working on. Both include screenshots, which are key to maintain consistency. Using direct photographs and taking screenshots also support procedural accuracy. You'll notice the purple boxes around pre and view that also support instruction by identifying word parts and delineating the prefix from the root word within the direction. This teacher is probably embedding that skill or using it to refer back to a skill that they have developed earlier on. The pictures are meeting our purposes. They are significant. Consistency is there with the screenshots, and it's all contextualized. These look pretty good. Daily 5 expectations. Each expectation is laid out with text and a picture. A classroom structure like Daily 5 is revisited and reinforced constantly, so we can safely assume that context has been given. However, every day and each activity within Daily 5 will require distinct materials, a different voice level, varying appropriate workplaces, so additional modeling and support will be needed. My only other concerns about this poster's visuals is whether the kids in the pictures represent the kids in your classroom. That's something for each teacher to reflect on. Now, the role of strategy direction sheet you see here is actually something I created for my first graders in my first year of teaching. So let's look at all my mistakes. Here, the pictures next to each roll of the die indicate the math tool or strategy itself. So I am helping to identify literal tools around the classroom, which is a valid purpose. The tally marks and the familiar fact images do model a little bit. However, the pictures do not explain how to use those tools or what it looks like to follow directions with each roll of the die. It would be much more effective if an expression was listed on the top, then a picture of solving or representing that expression with each tool next to its label. So because of the weak or inconsistent image choices, I'd have to say both of these are developing mastery. Here we have some Pinterest anchor charts. Everybody loves these. Let's see how they measure up against our rubric for effective picture use. The Boston Tea Party. This is a pretty popular one. Because of the way information is displayed, this picture takes on the role of graphic organizer. So if the purpose of using the teacup is novelty and making an event or political climate concrete, it does work. It meets that intended purpose. The picture does not serve any higher level support around the content details or supporting student understanding of the event, but again, our rubric establishes that any purpose can be met. So here we have a mastery level picture use. This science anchor chart is very simple, and the content vocabulary is supported with clever drawings. The images are given context with clear organization and color coding, which personally, anything with color coding gets an A in my book. To ensure consistency, the teacher will add this anchor chart to the lab instructions that will follow, and continue to use the plant, smiley face, and beakers to reinforce these terms throughout the unit. Remember the way we discussed speed, velocity, and acceleration in the task cards earlier? This would be the same idea. Establish a single icon or picture to represent independent variables, dependent variables, and your control. That way, anytime they come up, you can use that same image with a simple label, and it will impact student learning in a positive way. Rotate versus revolve. The purpose here is clearly to describe the similarities and differences between these two highly related terms. The pictures and structures do support our purpose. But that leaves us with developing or mastery, because remember, just meeting the intended purpose isn't enough. Consistency is achieved by using common pictures to represent Earth, the sun, and the seasons. So I do see consistency, and context is also well established. Rotate and revolve, mastery. Our final set of examples. First, we have units of measurement. Now, this poster uses pictures to provide real-world examples of these measurements. The examples chosen are appropriate and relevant for students. But because they're real-world examples, photographs, especially photos of doors, counters, and streets nearby, would have been more effective. Overall, a developing plus or mastery level. GRAPES. Now, I have never heard this acronym in the past, but the content is certainly strong and helpful. The only purpose I can see for the pictures on this poster are to ingrain the actual acronym GRAPES, hoping that students use the first letter of each civilization feature to remember and apply each factor. That seems like a tall order. These are individually really complex aspects of society. So while the grape bunches may meet the menial purpose, they don't support a significant piece of instruction. So we're immediately at D, developing. That's not to say images need to look cartoonish or primary. In fact, clip art, again, remember, will never be as powerful as photographs, sculptures, realia. Grapes, as a structure, is geared towards secondary ed, and the content is highly valid. However, the visuals are not used to support learning in this case. As the class studies each factor or analyzes a specific culture, add pictures via Post-its or ThingLink or Padlet to give more context. Maps, photographs, icons, all of these variations of pictures can be useful when they're attached to learning experiences from activities, texts, even videos. All right, we've reviewed some conceptual ideas as well as some practical strategies for using pictures to support instruction. We can now confidently say we know how to, how not to, and why we use pictures to support instruction. Fingerprint Education specializes in individualized learning for teaching and administrative teams. I've referenced Kagan, Thinking Maps, and diverse learners in this presentation. Contact us for more information about coaching for these instructional supports now. You can reach us at fingerprinteducation.com as well as consulting at fingerprinteducation.com. Thank you.